Hey, the boy from Norfolk. Just got in from walking the dog. Filthy day. Come on, Jack. And it's only something like, what, 4:15? It's dark already. Anyway, there was something I wanted to say about a video you posted last week, I think. You were talking with someone named Erie, who was talking about the Black Friday trampling. Somebody got trampled to death, I think, in New York. And his point was, or his contention was, that maybe if these uncaring people had God in their lives, something would have turned out differently. I'm not quite entirely sure. It put me in mind of a study done by Darley and Batson. The study was looking at divinity students. They had a bunch of divinity students, and what they told the divinity students they were going to do was a study on thinking on your feet, giving a presentation. And what they did was they gave half of the divinity students an assignment to go speak on job opportunities in the divinity field, and they gave the other half an assignment to go and speak on the parable of the Good Samaritan. Between those two sets of divinity students, they then further divided them into some who were going to be late for giving their speech, and others who were told, oh look, there's plenty of time, but you might as well go over early. Now, whichever group they were in, the Good Samaritan group or the talking about employment group, they all had to go between the buildings. They would pass an actor, it turns out, who was showing signs of distress. And then they studied how the divinity students behaved in these various situations. And this is how it broke down. Now, if you were one of the divinity students who was giving a talk on job opportunities, you probably didn't stop. However, if you were one of the divinity students who was going to give a talk on the parable of the Good Samaritan, the story about the man who stops for the stranger who is injured, you also weren't likely to stop, in about exactly the same amounts. Now, given that these are all divinity students, unfortunately we can't really split them by those that had a God and those that didn't have a God. But the thing that did make the difference was whether they were in a hurry or not. Those divinity students that were told that they were late, they were very reluctant to stop for anything. They would generally bypass the man, but they would look worried about it later. So at least they had feelings of guilt. Those that had plenty of time were much more likely to stop and offer assistance. Now, in the situation where you have a crowd of people stampeding into a store to buy a cheap Xbox, I think you have a situation where people are in a hurry there. So the amount of God that they have might not be the deciding factor in that. The other thing that's different is with the divinity students, it was all individuals who were on their own, and they were the only person there to assist that person, the actor who was in apparent distress. In New York, I think, you may be having the bystander effect kick in as well. The bystander effect is also called the Genovese syndrome. It's what you were alluding to where you gave the example from your life-saving. It's the fact that when you have a crowd of people and something really needs to be done, everyone assumes that someone else will do it. The Genovese syndrome is named for Kitty Genovese, who was a woman who was stabbed and killed. There were about 38 witnesses who failed to prevent this from happening. Now, the witnesses weren't all standing around in a crowd just watching her getting stabbed, which I think is sort of the impression that the original Time story gave back in 1964. But it did lead to a study on the bystander effect, and one of the principals in that study was Mr. Darley. Mr. John M. Darley, the same John Darley as I mentioned in the Good Samaritan study with the divinity students. Anyway, the boy from Norfolk, I hope I didn't bore you too much with that. Unlike this poor chap who seems to find me crashingly dull. Don't you, boy? Yes. Oh well. He's still a good dog, though.